this country. So it's 20 million United States dollars, not 25 as indicated in the slide. The other area through UDB is, through support financing to the private sector, is supporting the Microfinance Support Center to provide affordable credit. And this area, you must have heard from the minister's statement to the public that there are arrangements to reorganize the existing resources within the budget to ensure that some of it is ceded to the Microfinance Center in order to promote efficiency of resource use with respect to delivery of services. What are we going to do with respect to growth in the private sector, especially when we want to focus on economic growth factors over the medium term? In the private sector area, we intend to address the high cost of credit by, 1, introducing new financial reforms and products. Examples: Islamic banking, agency banking, which has already been launched by the minister, bank assurance, etc., etc. With respect to Islamic banking, I did mention it in the discussions with the URA yesterday, that the regulations are now out of the first Parliamentary Council. It has been drafted and they are ready for gazetting. There are only 1 or 2 issues that need further consultations on the basis of the demands by Parliament, and we expect that by October this year, which is within the first quarter of this financial year, all that will be cleared and we are ready to start the Islamic banking in this economy. 2, in addition, over the medium term, government's plan is to reduce domestic borrowing to support continued recovery in private sector credit, which is critical for growth. And in this area, you cannot wish away domestic borrowing. The only salvation we have is to pay attention to serious domestic resource mobilization to, as much as possible, finance the budget and reduce the fiscal deficit, which normally pushes us to borrow domestically in order to bridge the gap on the fiscal deficit. This will be possible as large infrastructure projects get completed, so that the fiscal deficit from that side of investment side equally reduced. The fifth area that we are going to do with respect to private sector growth over the medium term is control of accumulation of domestic arrears. For the next financial year, this financial year we provided 300 billion. Next financial year we intend to provide, we have provided 340.5 billion for partially clearing the domestic arrears. I call it partially because I think their quantum is slightly higher than the 340.5 billion. So this is the strategy we are going to adopt gradually as arrears gets verified, to clear it, because arrears essentially is services that the government has consumed but not paid for, and they should be paid for in order to encourage private sector growth and not to impair their growth instead. The second point that we want to look at is government has designated a domestic arrears strategy that deals with the controlling accumulation of new arrears and clearing the stock of existing arrears. To clear the stock of the budget will be increased to 600 billion with objective the other financial year, with the objective of clearing the current stock of arrears within 4 years, starting financial year 2019 to financial year 2022-23. So you can do the mathematics of what the stock of arrears is as we know today, and we wish and we know we shall enforce strictly areas or activities that ensure that there should be no further accumulation on the already bad stock that we have. I did mention the issue of revenue mobilization as something that's very critical for all of us to pay attention to, and therefore support every measure under the sun that government proposes and Parliament passes for revenue mobilization from within. What has been the performance of revenue from financial year 13-14 to this financial year? That table summarizes it and says it all. Points note, Although there has been growth in revenue collections each year, growth in revenue to GDP ratio has been modest. Structure of the economy has got the biggest impact on that. 2, domestic revenue to GDP ratio in recent years is low by both regional and international standards. Aware of that, therefore, what is the strategy of revenue, domestic revenue mobilization? The main objective of this strategy is to raise the tax to GDP ratio from a paltry 14.2% to 16% by 2022-23, in line with the NDP. To achieve the above objective, a 5-year domestic revenue mobilization strategy, DRMS, is being designed for that period. What's the content of the strategy? 1, it identifies weaknesses, which I think all of us should look into, in the tax system and the untapped potential. That one, underline it. 2, it provides a comprehensive roadmap to overcome these weaknesses and improve revenue collection. The next slide shows the components of this domestic resource mobilization strategy under mainly 3 pillars. Pillar 1, repair the tax policy, and under that you see the next 5 or 6 sub-strategies. Pillar 2, strengthen the revenue administration. You see the equal number of the strategies to anchor that. And then the third pillar is widen the revenue base, and there you see 4 pillars. Let me now turn to debt sustainability, and I want Julius to listen carefully. Yes, it's a data to government. Public debt is increasing, that's for a fact. Only in the short term, unexpected to decline dramatically over the longer term. Why is it increasing dramatically now? And the answer lies in what option do you have, or what's the cost of not doing it now? 1, it's increasing now rapidly because of funding of infrastructure development in line with NDP 2. And certainly, I've already talked about revenue. If revenue is growing at that rate, and you must do something about the growing the economy, then I think, for the time being, you might have to borrow a little more in order to achieve it now, because the cost of not doing it now is certainly much higher than what it would be if you don't do it. The high debt accumulation is only in the short term, expected to decline in the medium term as we complete these projects. And the table there summarizes how this has been growing over the period. And strictly, the bigger part about it is that the policy measures to ensure the sustainability must be kept in check. And those are in the next slide. We need to grow the exports by implementation of the National Export Development Strategy. We have also done recent studies with EPRC, which indicate that there are low-lying fruits, which, if we concentrated on them, will expand our export earnings from the 3 commodities of coffee, fish, and tea to an average of $2.6 billion per annum, from a paltry less than $1.1 billion from those exports currently. And there are quite a number of strategies which you'll be able to share later on or in the discussions, how you can do that on those 3 commodities alone, let alone the mineral potential. 2, reducing reliance on debt by enhancing domestic revenue mobilization through implementation of the new domestic revenue strategy, which I've just highlighted a while ago. 2, 3, ensure that projects are taken in a phased manner so as to smoothen out debt repayment profile, with priority given to projects that generate higher growth dividends. 4, improving project implementation to reduce cost overruns. Service delivery overall, therefore. Once all is said and done, I've looked at economic strategy, I've looked at the revenue mobilization, I've looked at our strategy for debt. Now, once all this money is mobilized, what is it applied for? And I invite you to look at the service delivery overall improvement and more effort required in this area in order to encourage voluntary compliance, encourage the ability of the economy or us to account to the public about these resources for which we are, in some cases, we are borrowing resources or money which will be paid later by future generations. What are the service delivery outcomes? The story is good. The story is good overall at a macro level. As provided under what the minister said, that service delivery outcomes have improved significantly. But as I said, more needs to be done. One, life expectancy has increased from 50.4 years in 2002 to 63.3 years in 2014. So I think I am going to live long as well. Two, literacy rates have improved from 70% in 2012-2013 to 74% in 2016-2017. Three, infant mortality under 5 mortality declined substantially since 2001. The graph in the trends is shown opposite. Access to key services has improved, but NDP2 targets are not yet achieved. The indicators are there. I don't want to read the whole thing because it will take a mouthful and consume much of your time. We shall come to it. Comparison between the period 2012-13 to 2016-17. And the remark column on the extreme right is very instructive in informing you about what we are talking about here. Third anchor is use of production services has improved, but outcomes are still poor. Maybe I take a little bit of your time on this one. Household access to planting materials increased from 56% in 2008 to 70% in 2015 due to NAD's Operation Wealth Creation and other programs. Two, household access to pesticides and chemicals has increased from 16% in 2008 to 33% in 2015. Three, household access to extension services remains low at 18% for crop husbandry. Four, poverty has increased among subsistence farmers due to drought. Underline the word drought, because that's where the solution is. Because drought may continue to be a phenomenon, and we cannot continue talking about drought without a proposal on how to tackle drought in subsistence households. Pests and disease and price fluctuations. Obviously, because they are exporting primary products, so what do you expect? The price will fluctuate depending on the value you have added there. So those are the challenges in this area, and I think therefore the solutions lie in there. How to mitigate drought, how to mitigate price fluctuations by adding value along the entire value chain for agricultural production. Under infrastructure, there are many outputs and sector outcomes yet to be achieved. A lot has been done, but there's still yet a lot to be done. And that table clearly indicates the achievements and against targets, and the remarks on the last column is very instructive. Almost a chorus not achieved, but I think we have reasons for not achieving them, which shall be the source of what we ought to do then to expunge those constraints. Under service delivery, although it has still improved, as I said, there are certain outcomes yet to be achieved. And what are we going to do to deal with those unachieved issues? The next slide, 16, shows that we need to strengthen planning and budgeting, proper costing multi-year commitments, minimizing supplementary budgets, etc., etc. Strengthen enforcement and compliance of PFM reforms is another basic important thing that we must do. Improve supervision of programs, strengthen public investment management, PIMS. These are the main anchors that we need to do under the policy side in order to improve service delivery. As I said, in the interest of time, I'll limit it to 30 minutes, which I think in Japanese we say, I've done tochino. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ochailap. You've hinted on a couple of things. I was excited about the fact that we are hoping our economy grows. The projection is 6% to 7%. Should accelerate to 7% over the median term. Julius, you should be a happy man. That means we are going to work harder, you and I. And then hopefully we shall get there. We're going to get some reactions from the panelists. Of course, at a certain stage, we shall open it up to the rest of everybody to share your thoughts, ask questions, and share your reflections. But we'll now get to the panel. But perhaps just for purposes of communication, I know we are live on air, but it's okay for the people in here. In case you want to feel very comfortable, you will use the door to my right. In case you become a bit uncomfortable and you want to get comfortable, the network is that door there. The Wi-Fi network is here, but the comfortability network is through that door. I'm sure you can read what's there on. All right, so let's keep moving. I'm going to invite Godbert Mushabe. He's from Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies. Quick reflections. I'll give you 3 to 5 minutes. Reflections on that, and later on, of course, you'll be coming back as questions do come.
Right. Thank you very much. Yeah, most probably. Yeah. It already works when it is government speaking. Yeah, thanks very much, Patrick, for really for the excellent clarity on the presentation. I think that the issues raised are very, very clear, and I really would want to applaud you on that. In these 3 minutes, I want to make about 3 quick comments. One. But before that, just let me congratulate the ministry for coming to the end of the budget process. And I think also congratulate the ministry for really trying to comply with the Public Finance Management Act. Because quite often we enact these laws and then we put them aside and continue doing our own things. So I think this is really commendable. And of course, secondly, the outreach. The fact that the ministry is coming out and meeting ordinary people like us is really, it's a new way of doing business, and I think it's, I really would commend it, and I think if we can take you downtown to the market women and border riders and the taxi drivers, then we probably will begin to talk real business. But 3 quick comments. One is, I want us to understand that we are operating in a political economic context. And in this political economic context, you want to look at 3 important institutions that are managing the budget. The presidency, the parliament, and the Minister of Finance. I call it a triangle. It's a 3-legged stool. That these 3, in our current context, are the most important institutions that determine our budget direction. But because of the concentration of expertise, of knowledge, and time that is here in the Ministry of Finance, the Minister probably is the most significant of all of them. So in other words, in terms of budget direction and all the parameters that Patrick has talked about, the Ministry has the biggest influence in terms of what happens. So sometimes you would not be surprised if we say, if there are any failures, it is because of the Ministry. If there are any successes, it is because of all of us. So don't be surprised. Thirdly, is to understand the function of budget. I think that from my perspective, a budget is an instrument that can be looked at in 3 dimensions. One is that a budget is a policy instrument. And as a policy instrument, you use it to shape policy, to introduce new policy directions. And it is much quicker because of the way the process runs. You can reform policies very quickly because if you pursue the budget, if you use the budget as a policy instrument. Secondly, you can use the budget as an administrative instrument. In other words, you take administrative measures to correct errors within the system at a very short time, because administrative actions are very, very easy. And I think one of the main administrative measures that the ministry has done, which is commendable, is the one of dealing with accounting officers. That you can require accounting officers to do certain things at every turn of event. That's an administrative measure. You don't need the law, you don't need what. And I think there is a lot that can be done with the budget. And three, the budget as a political instrument. Yes, there are politicians who want to achieve political objectives, and therefore you have to balance all the budget work with the political objectives. So, in other words, we need to look at the budget in those three perspectives, and I think if the ministry took it that way, there is a lot that can be achieved. Finally, on the range of issues that Patrick has raised, on the growth strategy, first of all, my main comment broadly is that what is new? Supposing this budget was ready in 2014 or in 2015 or in 2016, would it be different? So agriculture, I mean, the discussion has been on that we need to invest in agriculture, commercialize and transform. So we want to commercialize. But isn't this something that we have said time and again? So with this budget strategy, what is different? What is new? That all of a sudden we are going to see, accelerated commercialization of agriculture. I think that's one issue that I would want to put on the table. And I want to suggest that there are two things that are totally missing in the strategy that you probably could have mentioned. One is looking at the households as farms. That I think that transform agriculture, you have to look at the household as a farm, and therefore the investment must be organized around households. But is delivery of inputs through NADS and operational wealth creation, is that the way to do it? Are we able, for example, to show the number of farms that have been, the number of households that have commercialized in a given financial year, and therefore we say we are making progress? Related to that is the whole issue of districts. I think that I think that Patrick and the ministry, people here and the government, that there is no budget strategy that is going to work that does not look at the district as the primary unit of economic planning and economic organizing. I think that we have a huge elephant that is standing on the legs of a mosquito. So at the bottom there, we have districts that we have really not worked to make them run like businesses. And of course, I read in the budget speech, the minister reporting to Parliament that there is a challenge of creating a new district, and they will try and see how to reverse it. But you see, the districts come from this ministry, they go to Parliament and back. And then so the minister then reports to Parliament. Then you ask yourself, what exactly are these guys talking about? But let's assume politically districts are important for the politicians. We as Ugandans, as Ugandan taxpayers, want to be relying on the ministry to try and make them into productive economic units. And I think it's doable. And unless we do it, I don't think that we can really achieve much, especially in terms of agriculture. I would want to see a budget where money is given to districts and you say, I come from Ntungamo, we are a dairy district, we are an agricultural district. So we say, Ntungamo, we are giving you money and you are going to increase your milk production from 1 million liters to 5 million liters. And they can account to us. that they have increased it. But right now, I think the process of saying, oh, we have given Ntungamo 40 billion, I think we are lacking the math in terms of what we can do. I think I'll make one last point and then stop there, which is about the industrial parks. I think that this is, for me, is a strategy that I tried to advocate for in 2002 when I used to work with the National Council for Science and Technology, and I said, as a country, we need to be able to really find concentrations of economic activity. I think the go forward people would call it the sub-county model. Yeah? Yes. So you have a concentration of economic activity and it becomes like a growth center. And I think that my view is that this is a strategy that is spot on, but let's agree that we can do this methodically and without fear of favor, without coming back and say we didn't have this and we didn't have this, and I think if there is any borrowing that we do, let's put the money in those kinds of parks, because if the parks work, we can really use those as stimulants to be able to broaden growth. I think if it was not for time, I would have wanted to talk about revenue mobilization, but I don't.
I'll give you a minute for that.
Okay. So the revenue mobilization, I think that what I have said is related to revenue mobilization, because I think my biggest problem with revenue mobilization strategy is that I think you are trying to tax us too much. Many of us are law-abiding citizens, so want to pay tax. But every time I look around myself and I see how government is really, almost taxing me right, left, and center, you don't have where to hide. Yeah, I'm thoroughly confused in terms of because I say, should I dodge that? I don't want to fail to comply. But the thing is a killer. So I think that the revenue mobilization strategy, in my view, needs to be connected with the growth of the base. And the growth of the base is getting the households as farms to work, getting the districts to work. I'll give one example and complete. I am a farmer. I grow matoke in Ntungamo. I think I can claim to have the best banana plantation in my sub-county. Yeah? 4 acres. I have just opened up 5 acres, and now I'm starting to open up another 3 acres. But I can tell you that I had to wait for 2 weeks to access a tractor at Chamate Church of Uganda. That's the only tractor that is available. Yeah? Now I have decided, because this is also maybe I should use manual labor, yeah, to be able to open up. So that is a problem. How do you make these services available? 2, one of my dreams is to build a state-of-the-art school facility in Ntungamo district. It's a school that is properly planned, land secured. If my projection is that I can create 300 jobs instantly by starting that school. Now my argument has been that if the government could give, if Ntungamo district had maybe even 10 billion shillings in discretionary funding, which is there, this is our money to plan as Ntungamo. Ntungamo district should be coming to me and negotiating with me. How do we create a PPP to be able to start this project and get these people jobs? And of course, as a last comment, for Ntungamo municipality, you don't even need to keep on sending their money. You only need one big project in Ntungamo municipality for that municipality to transform from a trading center that it is now into a municipality. But the financing architecture that we have now is really a major problem, and I think the ministry has to think creatively on how do you revolutionize the budget architecture that we are implementing. Yeah, I think for now I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Godba. Godba, with those acres of land, you have clearly achieved middle income status already. You've gone ahead of the rest of us. But thank you for your submissions. When you hear Godba begin by praising the ministry, saying, yes, you followed the law, good stuff, you be careful, because you know missiles are coming ahead. Like when a nurse is about to inject you, they first massage you, and then eventually the pain comes. But good pain. We need to hear these things. So Godba, we are glad that You do two things. You give credit where it's due, and then you give advice where things should do better. Thank you for your submission. We'll now hear from Francis Kamulegea from PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Thank you very much, moderator. And I also start by commending the Minister of Finance and I guess government for this public debate and dialogue, and most importantly, the transparency with which, from my view and perspective, the budget is being done these days, monitored and also shared with the rest of the stakeholders. I follow the budget quite keenly, and the one thing that really intrigues me, and I want to table it in this discussion today morning, is the concept of a budget theme. We always have a theme every year, and for us in business, you know, we have mission, vision, you have values, we have objectives, we have goals, and then at some point after pronouncing them and defining them and cascading them to key players within our organizations, then we have an accountability framework that could be in the form of a performance appraisal, just really checking, you know, this is what we said 6 months down the line or 12 months down the line, how did we perform? So I'm just wondering, and PSST will help us here, and there are so many people from the ministry. When we say the theme for this budget is industrialization for job creation and shared prosperity, are we saying the objective of this budget is that, the expected outcome of this budget is that, the intention of this budget is that, and for those of you, the stakeholders, the shareholders, who are going to appraise your performance as you, ladies and gentlemen, with the custodian of our economy, should we be then appraising your performance on the 19th of June 2019 when we're sitting here, 12 months after the implementation of this budget, on the number of jobs that will have been created, on the industries that will be in our country, and the prosperity with which that country will have achieved? Because this is an open dialogue. Let's agree on KPIs. How are we going to measure performance of the economy in this country of ours? Otherwise, it just becomes a nice, catchy theme every year, and maybe you know, competition who comes up with something which is more catchy and buzzword and more sexy, and let that be on the glossy document. I don't think that's the intention, but let's talk about the theme, and let's agree when we sit here 12 months from now what we'll be asking of you in terms of accountability. Secondly, I also commend the economic growth that has been reported. We always take that with a pinch of salt, because until the U-boats numbers are out, and we'll wait for that, hopefully in August or thereabout, and then we see what actually the growth will be. But it's no doubt that the economy has grown from what we see, even those of us who are villagers and do a bit of farming. One wonders how much credit goes to the government. Because when you talk about agriculture, our agriculture is rain-fed, and I think the glory and praise goes to God for that. We then talk about the growth in the service sector, financial services, telecoms. I think, again, the private sector should take the full credit for that because of the investment and the very good decisions they are making. When it comes to public infrastructure construction, there's no doubt that that's the biggest expenditure as far as government is concerned. And no doubt, again, credit goes to government with regards to investment in public expenditure. I've got a different perspective with this reported growth. Economic growth is quantitative. It's a number. 4% last year, 5.8 this year, projected to grow to 6 and then accelerate to 7 in the medium term. I hope we all know what medium term is and how many years that is. But medium keeps moving away from us because next year's medium term will be 3 years from next year. And thereafter and thereafter. But eventually we'll get there. NDP targeted 6%, NDP 1, and I think 6% in NDP 2. we've not hit that, unfortunately. I stand to be corrected, but I don't think we've hit that for the last, in this current NDP. And with our population growth at 3.3, anything less than 7% is just not good enough, given our level of debt. Having said that, my appeal again and request is to start looking at some qualitative measures as far as the development of our economy is concerned, so that we at some point talk about economic growth, which is an absolute number, and economic growth is very easy to achieve. If you build so many roads and you have a massive hydropower project in billions of shillings, add that asset to the existing stock of assets we have, that's a major addition to the stock of assets, and percentage-wise, the economy has grown. But how has that growth translated into meaningful, qualitative economic development for the citizens of Uganda? Because at the end of the day, that is what matters most to them. And again, my appeal and request is that in this discussion, dialogue, maybe in the budget statement, maybe in the parliamentary statements, let's have something that talks about the qualitative economic development and talking about the Human Development Index, so that the person out there can actually be made to feel this growth. Because what you're going to hear, PSST and honorable members, is that where is this growth? Because the man on the street does not feel it. The man on the farm, when I say man, I include women as well, do not feel it. I also have issues with the current measures that we're using, and education in particular. For quite some time we've talked about the number of children enrolling in school. Let's move on from enrollment. Let's talk about how many complete school. Let's talk about the quality of the education. Let's talk about the competitiveness of our human capital, because at the end of the day, that is where that is what matters most, and that's how we're going to have to compete as a country. And basically what my submission here is that I think we need to be open to a new way of discussion, a new way of changing the narrative in terms of the KPIs, the key performance measures, because many of the numbers and the statistics and the graphs that we show are very good and very encouraging, but they are not meaning much to the citizens of Uganda. Finally, on the service delivery issue, again, PSST, I'm requesting that let's focus more on the outcomes and results as opposed to the budget allocated. Very often we get very excited, agriculture now is 800 billion, 5 years ago it was about 400 billion, but tourism, by the way, Amos, I keep saying that tourism, you don't need so many billions going to it as a sector per se, because of all the, other supportive infrastructure expenditure that goes into the country, but we'll get to that. But let's talk about results, let's talk about outcomes, let's talk about the benefits to the population. Because if you don't, and you don't articulate it, because they're there, but if you don't, then you're always going to find that disconnect. And it's not very good for us to sit here, and then the people out there saying, we're sitting here, we're talking GDP, we're talking development, we're talking statistics, but the man on the street is continuing to hurt. So let's talk a language that they understand. I want to make one brief comment on the level of debt in our country. The economists know this very well. We talk about the debt in current real terms, then again you discount it, and then you then look at the size of the budget, and then you look at the size of the economy. I personally, as an individual, have quite a bit of debt, and debt is not a problem if the money being borrowed is being applied properly and there is something to show for what you have borrowed. There is no country which does not have debt. And in fact, if there are individuals in this room that don't have debt, it's good for you, but also there's a limit to how much you can develop, relying entirely on your net pay or your dividend from your company or whatever it is that you're earning. So at some point, the narrative, I think, has to change from the size of the debt and all the statistics and the debt sustainability, and then focusing on where that money has gone, and most importantly, how that money is going to translate into inclusive economic development. Because if you build a road, it's a major infrastructure addition to the economy, and there's an objective. Building a road in itself cannot be an end in itself. So there's an objective The same goes to the hydropower project. The same goes to all the oil roads that we're focusing on. But during the course of the construction of those projects, how much direct, indirect, induced economic activities are rising during the course of construction? Here I'm talking local content. Secondly, once they are completed, then what next? Because a road to nowhere will actually just remain a road. But roads have to be targeted. There have to be some difficult political discussions about not building a road simply because people somewhere there were threatening to eat a rat. It happened some time back, so many years ago. But actually deciding which roads to build, while at the same time leaving some money for the social services sector of this country. As an individual, I would not talk to my children and tell them, we won't pay school fees, I have no money to buy your medicine, but I'm building a 3-storied house. In 3 years' time, we'll be fine living in a nice, fantastic house. We need to get the balance right between infrastructure development and social services investment and expenditure in our country. And my view right now, it's very, very lopsided towards big capital infrastructure projects. If we are not careful, some could become white elephants. We need to have that discussion very, very frank here and now. We've got installed generation capacity in this country that could be in the excess of 1,500, close to 2,000 2 years from now. This budget, which talks about industrialization, I really hope there are industries that are going to take that power. Because right now, even the 2 mega projects that we have in Jinja are not producing to capacity. Yes, I agree we need to have these investments now, because if you delay them, it could be more painful. But at what expense when it comes to social services, health, education, agriculture, you name it? I rest my case for now.
Thank you, Francis, for your submissions. You talk about debt. A friend of mine likes to say, where 2 or 3 people are gathered, 2 of them have a debt. And that's probably true for many of us here, but it's good to hear that advice. That debt is not necessarily a bad thing, but where is this money going and what is it being used for? But even more importantly, I like that you are asking that we ask for accountability, and that's where you bring in the question of KPIs, key performance indicators. The budget theme being industrialization for job creation and shared prosperity. That to me sounds like a promise. A promise that has been made to us, and we need to hold these good people accountable so that promise is delivered on. It might not be in its entirety, but how do we keep track of that promise? For those of you here who are married, you made promises to your spouses, and I'm sure you evaluate every so often to see whether or not you're still on track. Okay, that doesn't sound like a very popular subject, but you get the point. When a promise is made, it's important to follow up on that promise. I met a couple, they were vowing to each other, and the wife was telling the husband, I love you. When you laugh, I'll laugh with you. When you mourn, I'll mourn with you. When you cry, I'll cry with you. When you jump over the bridge, I'll miss you. I said, I thought you're supposed to do everything together. So anyway, so we need to see how we keep track of these things, and it's good that we have many of us in this room that can keep holding these good people accountable. I want to bring in a couple of other people. I know the other person here is Mr. Kenneth Mugambe, the Director of Budget. He said for him you spoke already through the budget. As Director of Budget, this is his document. So he spoke. So today he wants to sit here and he listens. And that's why he sat at a very vantage point so that he sees who is saying what. So maybe you need to be careful what you say. but he's interested in hearing your feedback so that they can see how to improve. I want to move to this table here and hear from some of the folks here. We'll keep cascading and getting to hear from everybody. I'll request for a microphone to come to this table. I see honorable MPs, I see some industry captains. Julius's hand is up already, so we'll run to him. Julius Mukunda.
Okay, thank you so much. I think, Chair, again, to give you credit for getting out of the comfort zone. I know we are still within your buildings, within your building, but still, I mean, it's a few kilometers to the major areas out there. But I think this is a very good innovation. Thank you so much. And we were hoping that we can have some candid discussion on how we can do to improve our economy. For the meantime, let me just have only 2 points. I think, first of all, is that for us to be able to achieve the economy we deserve, the outcome that we want, there are certain hard decisions we must make as a ministry. And that is taking leadership on any economic technical matter to avoid any decisions that is taken by any other person that is contrary to economic objectives of what this ministry is trying to pursue. 2 points come in mind. Number one, of course, is you need to ensure that whatever parliamentary decision comes out and is contrary to what you believe in, you come out as a ministry and stop it. For example, we know very well that if you want revenue to be generated by anybody, and the PSSD has said it, every leader in this country must pay tax. It must come from leadership. And we expect as a ministry to be the first to come out and say, please, everybody. And we know that just one street down here, we have issues with those members of parliament who definitely decided not to. No wonder my friend here is having difficulty hitting the target of taxation. Secondly, some hard decisions have to be made in the area of compliance. We cannot allow any sector without a strategic plan to be given money. For heaven's sake, how can we continuously give money to sectors that do not have plans? This is what we call technical leadership in terms of ensuring that the little money we have is spent wisely. Kamliga talked about KPIs. I totally agree with him. But I also know we have the performance-based budget indicators. Can we have, at an appropriate opportunity, have a compilation of these indicators for each and every ministry? Because we know the ministry, you are spending money in these sectors and they must be able to implement what they agreed in the budget. Can we have them published so that we can begin to demand accountability? If the Ministry of Agriculture said that they are going to contribute 40% to GDP, that's their problem. They said it. We want next year, at the same time, to be able to, for them to come here and tell us whether they achieved, and if they did, why not? Lastly, I think I just can't leave this micro by not talking about some toxic economic decisions that are contravening the very basis of our theme of this particular financial budget we are talking about, industrialization. Chair, I think it's high time the ministry again comes up and say taxing mobile money transaction is toxic and a bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Julius. He's made interesting accusations, missiles towards members of parliament. The good thing, we have MPs here, so you'll be defending yourselves at some point. But I saw Mr. Baragawa's hand up. We could hear from him, then we'll come to the MPs as you prepare your rebuttal.
Well, thank you very much, moderator, and thank you very much, Minister of Finance. I also want to add my voice to thank you for this outreach, and thank the panelists for the comments to which really I must associate myself with, especially the issue of ensuring that we have strategic plans so then we can budget against these plans and spend money in a way that we know is going to support job creation and shared prosperity. Now, just 2 comments on the revenue mobilization strategy. I read in the budget speech that government is planning to waive taxes for government bodies that have accumulated tax liabilities. what is your position on this? Because if it were the private sector, would be seeing padlocks from Katesha and a number of others. We would be seeing padlocks to those that have actually gone against your tax act. Why is government being why are we waiving taxes for government bodies that have not remitted this to URA? That's one. Two, I read in the budget that the minister was very excited about growth, which was on account of the very good weather. I thought this should have not gone in the budget speech. That the minister and the rest of the Ministry of Finance is very excited about the growth on account of good rains and good weather and so on. When I read paragraph 27 in the budget speech of 2017, it is very clear there are about 9 strategic areas that you promised us to intervene in. And one of them was to install solar-driven irrigation systems in 9 institutes, agriculture institutes. Now, one would have expected in terms of budget performance to hear how much have we, when you read that paragraph 27 in the budget speech of 2017, and I think this is where now we need to sound and emphasize accountability. When we read the budgets, we must come back and ensure that what we have promised the citizens is what exactly we are doing. The challenge that we have is that midway, we find other priorities. Other priorities you can look at, for instance, the Parliament. Parliament can come up with a priority to establish another 9 districts or 7 constituencies or whatever it is, but which was not planned in the budget of last year. How can we ensure that we live with the priorities that we have? Pronounce ourselves true within the budget strategy, because here we are now looking at 3 key things which in my opinion are critical for this economy and in line with the theme, job creation and shared prosperity. And that is commercialization of agriculture and making sure that we link industry to the producer groups. That is critically important for us. And as private sector, we have been sounding this. I want to thank you so much for bringing this in your budget strategy. But the taste of the pudding is in the eating. Then 2 is industrialization and productivity enhancement. Yes, we have had the 2.8 trillion for education. But one wants to know, in terms of BTVET, business, technical, vocational education and training, that we have promised. I think for every sub-county we have promised that we are going to have this institute. How far have we gone over the year? These are things that the population wants to hear. When you talk about financing private sector investment and you are concentrating on microfinance, where even the president said 36% per annum, 3% per month. What are we doing? Can we consolidate these funds and put them like in UDB? Why should we be running to Exim Bank and Japan and IDB and to make sure that we'll capitalize the UDB? When we have funds that we are throwing around, some of them are actually free. We have the Youth Livelihood Fund where people are borrowing and cannot bring back the money. We have the Women Employment Schemes. We have the Agricultural Credit Fund. We have microfinance. Everything is thrown around and we can't actually monitor what is happening. So it is important, in our opinion, that we consolidate these funds and only give funds to viable projects. Someone should come with a project. Let us look at an export value chain and ensure that we put money where, and this is also going to help us on debt sustainability. It's going to help us. Because once you put money in productive ventures, in areas that create wealth, provide jobs and so on, you build capacity for enhancement of the tax base and so on. And ultimately, you are able to finance your own budget. Lastly, inspection and supervision. Even for the budget itself, do we ever come back and ask ourselves, are we getting there? Through the year, are we getting there? I really want to see a lot of effort put in budget monitoring, the performance of the budget. Where we put money, what has happened. Who has done what? Who was supposed to do this and why have they not done it? We should reprimand accounting officers. Look at the procurement. Look at all these things. I think accounting officers, and I'm very happy that you are now zeroing down, everyone should come up with a plan. The PSCs, the cows, everyone who is getting money from the budget should be able to present to you a plan. When we read the certificate of compliance from the National Planning Authority, clearly 40% of the MDS did not have strategic plans. Why on earth, therefore? Because if it were the private sector, and we have said this before, and you don't have a business plan, and you run to a bank to borrow money, you cannot even get close to their gates. You don't have a business plan. You don't know what you want to do. You cannot pick money from anywhere. Why should the government be giving money to people that do not know what they want to do? And can we begin to see accounting officers being reprimanded? Because they are mortgaging the future of this economy. If you are an accounting officer and you are waiting for a budget and you don't know what to do, you don't have a plan, why are you being kept in that position, for heaven's sake? So can we see action from the PSST against these accounting officers? Again, I'm happy that that came out in the budget. But as I said, the taste of the pudding is in the eating. We will wait to see which accounting officers have been reprimanded for this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Badagawa. We'll hear from Mama, then we'll come to Dixon.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Minister of Finance, for the public awareness. I have 2 points, and one of them centers on economic growth. When I look at the economic growth vis-a-vis the tax growth, I see that there is a mismatch. I would have expected the two to move into the same direction. So that's mismatch. I think we need to really think through it and see how best we can make sure that they all move in the same direction. And when I look at the sources of growth, it worries me a little bit. When I look at yes, the agricultural sector has grown from 1.6 to 3.2, but we need to know where that growth is coming from. From your presentation, it did indicate that this is coming from food crops. Okay? And then when you look at the cash crops, there was a decline. What does that mean? Before we celebrate, we need to be able to understand, to tease out these figures for us to be able to come up with a proper solution. When it comes to the industry, you look at the manufacturing, which can help us to create jobs. The growth was the least, from 2.2 to 4.4. And when you compare to the, is it mining and something? It is about 17.9. So I think we should not celebrate before we unpack what is really included in the growth that we talk about. When it comes to fishing, which is a major export for Uganda, the growth was from 1.7 to a negative 2.9. And that is a big worry. So let's try to celebrate where it is necessary, but also being mindful that a lot of work needs to be done to take us where we want to go. The second one has to do with the service delivery, vis-a-vis what Francis talked about the indicators and so on. I think we need to be a little bit more careful when we are comparing our budgets from where we are coming from and where we are going. Because when I look at the service delivery indicators we have there, they are for the previous period. Okay? That is 2013. Where? It is 2012 to 2013 to 16-17. So we don't have any indicators between the two budgets, between 16-17 and 18-19. So we need to be careful there, otherwise we are going to be misleading ourselves. Uganda is a signatory to the SDG, And I'm sure that the SCDG tells us that we should not leave anybody behind. But when you look at the entire budget speech, I was trying to look for inequality, and I did not see anything around inequality. And we kept quite a little bit about it, whereas inequality is a more dangerous disease than poverty itself. So I would have loved to see something around inequality. What are you going to do about it? And it is also growing, and we are catching up with countries like South Africa, where inequality is also very high. And lastly, it has to do with weak monitoring, evaluation, and learning. We need to see how best we can be able to do some work around this. For instance, I've seen in the budget speech that we need to fully implement the agricultural insurance scheme. I don't know what full implementation means, but this program, all these initiatives need to be evaluated so that we pick lessons before we scale them up. We did indicate when our government wanted to scale up the SAGE project, and we said it was not time for us to scale up. And we decided politically to scale up the SAGE project and see what is coming out now. So we need really to do serious monitoring, evaluation, and learning before we do some of these things. And lastly, I haven't seen anything to do with managing expenditure wastages. Vis-a-vis, we are talking so much about revenue mobilization, but not managing our expenditures. Probably we need to pay also more attention towards that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah Sewanyana. I request that we lessen the time we use to submit so that we can have several other submissions. Let's now hear from Dixon Kateshumbwa. Those are the guys collecting the money that these good people decide should be collected from you.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad that we are here, and of course congratulating our ministry for the job well done. I want to comment about some key issues. One, on the domestic revenue mobilization. There is no doubt that the challenge is on, looking at the target for next year, which is 16.4 trillion. It becomes a responsibility for all of us Ugandans, if we expect services, that we must be able to contribute and meet our obligation. Looking at the expected tax, when you look at the year that is just concluding, if you look at the major contributors, the sectors which are contributing a lot of tax, wholesale comes at the top with 29%, followed by manufacturing, 27%, financial services at 11%, and at the bottom there we have agriculture, less than 1%. Yet, the agriculture sector, we know, is the one that employs majority of Ugandans. So the key thing here, I think, the message out of the budget and the president's speech is that commercialization of agriculture is very key. Because if this sector is commercialized, the productivity is high, then we'll be expecting to see a lot of contribution. For that to happen, we have to look at the entire value chain. And this is where sometimes we don't look at we look at how much has been put in agriculture, but forget to look at the whole value chain. From land acquisition, preparation, using irrigation methods, to the inputs that are used, to the plantation, the extension services, post-harvest management, processing, transportation, marketing for both export and local. The whole value chain must be looked at with a business mind. But if we don't do that, then we will have productivity issues. Now, if you look at the whole value chain and you look at the budget that has been read, there is a lot that government has done to incentivize the whole value chain. So if you look at irrigation, for example, the inputs used in irrigation exempted. You come to machinery, exempted. You come to fertilizers, pesticides, equipment needed, exempted. If you come to the transportation, goods carrying vehicles, there are exemptions. If you are doing agriculture outside, 50 kilometers outside Kampala, you'll find that there are tax exemptions that are in the Income Tax Act. If you do export, there are exemptions. So the question is, why are we not going into agriculture? The elite, the likes of Godba, I'm glad he's proud to talk about his farm, but how much beyond you, Godba, how much are you doing to get your neighbors? Because if you go around your farm, you'll find your neighbors are struggling. So how much of learning can take place so that we have more Godbas in Ntungamo? And so my message to the private sector, to the public out there, is that let's look at the entire value chain and take advantage of the incentives out there. If we do that, then we shall have productivity going up, we have markets, and then we shall be able to see revenue coming out.
Okay.
My second point, if I could try to...
I'll give you 30 more seconds.
Yes. The manufacturing sector. We've seen a lot of farms coming, and I want to dispel the fact that there will be too much electricity with no factories. That one is not going to happen. There are so many factories that are coming. We are seeing a lot of interest. So electricity will be consumed, no doubt. The challenge we see is that there has to be an effort to develop skills for our youth. And that to happen, there has to be some kind of mindset change. I mentioned the other day that I have visited some manufacturers who tell you that today this section is not working because my work has never turned up. But if you drive to Nakao Market for shopping, before you park, you'll be surrounded with about 20 youth, each one with bags wanting to carry for you something. How much do they earn in a day if you look at that? Why can't they go to these factories? There is a problem with the mindset. There are jobs, but our youth need to be converted in terms of the thinking, the patience to go and work and get skills so that they can be able to create more jobs. I will stop there. I will not talk about tourism because of time. But in summary, if you look at the key sectors in line with the theme, government has done a lot. The only problem...
Looks like they're operating the way Parliament does. When your time is up, they just switch you off. But thank you. All right, I'll finish that point in 10 seconds. Dixon.
Yes, what I'm saying is that the debate about taxation usually is reduced to one issue out of so many, and we forget to go into a lot that government has put in there in the budget that the public need to know and take advantage of to grow our economy. I thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We'll hear from one or two of the MPs, and then we'll bring in the folks at the back. Kind of Fred Mwesije.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I'd like to join my colleagues to thank the organizers of this dialogue and specifically Minister of Finance. I want to applaud this budget as a pro-people budget and pro-development. I want to agree with the previous speakers like Mr. Godba Mushabe that districts, sub-counties, even parishes should be oriented deliberately as business entities. And we should take stock at every financial year to see what we have achieved. So government should really concentrate and focus in this area. And I think we should have time to discuss with Magudba how to go about it. I also agree with Mr. Kamre here that all countries do borrow, even Dubai, even the oil countries borrow. But the difference is how this borrowed money is efficiently utilized. So really, we have a lot of money in this country that can actually cover most of our needs. But you find that most of the resources are scattered all over the place in duplicated efforts. And we've been calling upon government really to consolidate some of these duplicated areas so they are consolidated in one place so that they can be more efficient. And we shall have time to, and we have had time to talk about it, and we shall continue talking about them. For example, recently we were trying to make a loan, KCCA, and they are planning to set up a planning authority under KCCA, and then there is a planning National Development Authority, there is a planning authority in the land sector. So all these things, there are so many sectors, many examples that we can look at and try to reconsolidate so that they become more efficient and save on wastage. Now on private sector, I want to really call upon the ED of the private sector, Mr. Badiga. He spoke so well, and I agree with him. But the private sector should be demystified, should be made simpler to be meaningful to the people. Because when you go there, every situation is very complicated. And I would like to call upon the ED of private sector. Government should really simplify that sector because it can be a tool to support some of these areas which we have been talking about. Support the private sector to commercialize agriculture. Then when we look at the budget strategies, of course, very good. As you can see, commercialization of agriculture, people have talked about it. I think there is need to be more practicable, to be realistic. Because when you talk about commercialization of agriculture, you don't see mechanization at sub-county level. No tractors, no machines to do bush clearing, no fertilizers, no bulk water for production. We talk about these things. Uganda is the most endowed country in the water bodies. But where is irrigation? We talk about it, irrigation every time. We don't see it. So I'd like to call upon Minister of Finance really to go down and make sure that these things we talk about actually trickle down and become more meaningful to the population. Then the other thing is, as Mr. Kateshumbo of URA has said, I agree with him that the whole value chain should be cut up to the final product which is the market. We should do more in that sector. Then agriculture will be more meaningful. But some of these areas you are talking about are not known to the public. I don't know where these things are really known by the public in the villages and rural area, or even by most elites, those tax exemptions in the agriculture sector. So I would call upon you to go out and open to the public so that we know that there is more that supports agriculture, that can be incentives, it can pull people to agriculture. Then I would like to see more effort on industrialization and especially the skilling of Ugandans. There is a big funding in skilling Ugandans. But when you go down in the village, in the rural area, in the countryside, you don't see a lot. First of all, accessing these technical schools, as you know, is very expensive for ordinary children. And I have had time to discuss with the president, why can't we make technical education free, for example, like we have made for USE and UPE? Because we cannot industrialize if we don't have skilled labor in this country. We are entering the oil market, but we don't have welders. We're talking about pipeline. Where do we have the welders being trained? We don't have truck operators. We want to have very many trucks in this country, many huge earth-moving equipment, but we don't have schools, centers of excellence to train these people to be employed in that big market. I don't see much being done by. So I'd like to call upon Minister of Finance and real government really to focus on these areas. What we talk, what we write here, let it be meaningful to the population.
Okay, Honorable.
Thank you very much. I rest my case.
Thank you. Honorable Kateshum, Honorable Kangoje, I will seek your indulgence. If I could just pick a few people from the back, I'll certainly come back. In Parliament where you sit, there's normally the front bench, then the back benches.
But mine were just few.
Yours were few.
Why don't you allow me speak then you?
In 50 seconds. All right,
Yes.
Go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm by names of Honorable Stephen Kangwaje, MP Bukangi Sinjiro District. I'm sorry I just came in late, but I have some few comments on water and on cows particularly. Let me begin with the chief administrative officers in our districts there. We have a challenge. I'm sorry, Minister of Finance. A cow, for example, will frustrate a district like Chiruhura. In a way of punishing that creature, you transfer him to Isinjiro. What will happen to that district? Automatically, he will go like the way he went. That district will be the same as Chiruhura. We need to have a way on how we shall be able to hand ourselves with the chief administrative officers, with their CFOs, chief finance officers, and the engineers. We have to do that. On the issue of water, when we talk about agriculture, in our areas, for instance, a district like Isinjiro is one of the most productive districts we have in Uganda, whereby we are the most producers of matoke and milk. But look at the issue of irrigation. We have water sources nearby, but it's quite hard for people to get water up there. Those ones who grow matoke and so forth. Why don't we really give them opportunities and a real priority on how you can give or tap water and you draw it to where they are? There is a need really to concentrate on water to our farmers. Secondly, members, on service delivery. We shall not be able to get what we want if we don't have the capacity, if we don't have the real zeal, if we don't have the real culture of paying taxes. We have seen good strategies. We have good programs. As Ugandans, we need to love Uganda, buy Uganda, build Uganda, and we have to pay taxes. Failure to do that, for example, Mr. Moderator, if you can give me a few minutes, you cannot expect a child before you conceive. You must conceive, then sit there and wait for a child. So how shall we be able to get roads, water, electricity, over what? And you don't want to pay taxes. As Ugandans, if we want to develop, let us pay taxes. Failure to do that, no services.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Honorable. I could hear some talk around that MPs, are you paying your fair share? All right. Let's hear from a lady now. Let's hear from Sophie from Oxfam.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Sophie, you'll be
Moderator.
speaking in 1.5 minutes so that we can pick several others.
And I'll hasten my voice on that. I'll add my voice to my previous speakers in thanking the Ministry for this initiative. It's well appreciated. But I want to say that we've acknowledged that economic growth in Uganda is rising and increasing. In the medium term, 7% is expected. But Oxfam 2 years ago conducted a study that indicated that while growth is recognized, inequality is actually deepening. Inequality is the gap between the rich and the poor. And it hinted that the drivers of this inequality were among so many, including the slope-sided allocation of resources with social sector spending, social sector allocation, and infrastructure development and allocation of resources. This budget for financial year 2018-2019 gives us less opportunities to be able to address this inequality. If anything, it actually increases on this driving of this inequality. I would like to encourage the Minister of Finance to implore themselves further and dig deeper in understanding how can they create a balance. As you address economic growth and you struggle to increase this economic growth, as well struggle to reduce the inequality, to reduce the gap between the rich and the poor. Because all of you don't expect to have a Uganda where you have those who have on the other side and those who don't have on this other side. You will not enjoy that Uganda. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll move to the back a bit and hear from Ramadan Gobi.
Thank you. I also thank the ministry for doing this.
Do you understand so that the camera captures you properly?
Oh, thank you. I was thanking the ministry for organizing this. It's quite uncommon to come here, but we were invited by the, personally, for example, by the director budget, and I was like, what brings this confidence to these guys? And I think it's because the budget is getting, better and better in allocative efficiency. I know we have some issues with it, but especially on that aspect which she has talked about. I was looking at these budgets and I saw in 1998-99 we allocated 34% of the budget on education and health. And this year we are allocating 20%. And we are talking of a population which has grown almost in that period by 15 million or more. So we need really to refocus the budget again to some of these human development aspects. We need to invest in the people as well as we are investing in these other things. Now, I wanted to comment on two things. We need, first of all, to have this conversation before the budget. Let us next year have it around February, before even you go to Parliament, so that we can have also some input, which is going to make, to add value. Secondly, in my view, we need to stop two things. We need to stop chasing growth as an end and pursue some structural change. Because even when growth was here, when we were growing at Chinese rates, the growth remained jobless, the inequality increased, the unemployment increased. We need now to get research. We need to base our budget on research, informed by research. And this is where EPRC and other research institutions and earth academics, we need to be involved in this. And we have a challenge of accessing data, for example, which we can help the ministry, where we can help the ministry to inform it on some of these allocations we are making. Like we have talked about agriculture. Emotionally, many people say agriculture, put in more money. But we need to know, there is a conversation in town. As you know, Director, we always have a conversation in finance that you are investing for agriculture. You invest in other sectors which are complementary with agriculture. But also, some of us were saying we should invest in agriculture. And now, this debate can only be resolved by research. And outside this country, they have those who have done some research and found that investing in agriculture, $1 generates $3.1. While investing for agriculture, $1 generates $0.43, less than $1. So that means if we could as well do that here, we would help the policymakers, to put money where it's supposed to go. Lastly, I need also to say that we need to stop relying on good luck and God. I think much of this growth we are celebrating is not our own making. It's not the artistry of the policy maker. It's God. It is good luck. When China stopped growing, when DRC started managing their affairs better, when South Sudan went to war, when commodity prices fell, the economy stopped working. Now, we need to start investing in certain things which are going to really liberate us from God and good luck. And those things are the ones we always say. In this budget, for example, where is money for getting the theme to work? Industrialization. Why do you give industry only about industry and trade, actually, only about 134 billion? And it is the accelerator sector we are putting forward. Why don't we capitalize UDC, Uganda Development Corporation? We have a good law, we have sorted out governance issues, and we know that manufacturing is the accelerator sector everywhere in the world to getting younger people from unskilled to skilled to get into work. So UDC needs 500 billion. What does it take to get this money? And you see how private sector is going to come and join you. Because once government has financed the learning costs, because industry has very high learning costs, then the private sector will come in. I think that's my submission. Plus also agriculture. We need money in especially the value addition area of the value chain. Thank you.
Thank you. You talked about data from the ministry. I had somebody with the title website administrator during introductions. So I think their work is cut out. Okay, let's move a bit to this side. I'll come back this side. Let's hear from Amos Wekesa. I like to think of him as Ambassador Amos Wekesa. He, except for the fact that he doesn't earn a salary as ambassador, he doesn't get allowances, he
I actually don't
markets
need
Uganda.
Thanks. I'm a private sector player, so I don't need anyone to pay me. I only need good policies. That said, thank you so much for inviting us, and I also must commend this whole activity as well. I was also invited by the director budget. He's actually marketing it everywhere, telling people we're going to be dealing with the budget, guys, we're doing this. And I wish everybody in finance, in every WhatsApp group you're in, you're doing the same, telling everybody. And then, of course, the other one was Katashumbo as well. He's also been trying to tell everybody, this is what the government is doing. It's a good thing. But that said, I think it's extremely very disheartening that someone can put up great presentation and actually don't include tourism. Mr. Ngovi has just said $1 invested in agriculture brings 3.5. You cannot come to this audience and not talk about tourism. Mr. Ngovi says $1 invested in agriculture brings $3.5. Now, Google, look for research on tourism. $1 brings in about $11. If you invest $1 in tourism, you bring in $11. But also, just to give you an example, there's no country in the world that is as densely gifted as Uganda. Culture-wise, our water bodies, our lakes, our rivers. In fact, we have left the Nile that our neighbors are saying the Nile begins in their country. Then another country, Egypt, is saying the greatest river in the world starts and ends in Egypt. Lake Victoria is empty. Look at what's happening. You gave us 11 billion for marketing the country in the last year. I mean, only 6 billion actually have brought big value, and I can tell you why. You had 3 PR farms. They have done work in 1 year. As we speak right now, to go and see a mountain gorilla. The challenge is that they only focused on a low-hanging fruits. They focused on primates. Now, for you to see, if you're a foreigner, to see the gorillas for 1 hour, you pay $600. And I can tell you, if you call now, between now and September, there's no single gorilla permit available, which is a good thing. How many farmers are going to grow tomatoes in order to earn $600? And you know what we're talking about? Chimpanzee trekking is $150, $500,000 for you to see them for 1 hour. For you to climb the Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, you pay $3,600 per person. Now, the best mountain on the continent, actually mentioned among the top hiking places in the world by National Geographic, is the Rwenzoris. Kilimanjaro is doing 60,000 tourists climbing it, each of them paying an average of $3,600. The best mountain on the continent, Rwenzori, is having 900 tourists in a year. So for tourism, for this country to grow, research has shown that tourism can make up to $12 billion a year. As a country, we need to be sitting down and thinking on a bigger picture. How can we have an economy which has a GDP of 27.9 billion when Uber is 70 billion? It has business, it has nothing structurally. Facebook has just gone to $500 billion. Facebook, which we sit on. And all of us sitting here very clever. Combined, we're like a business in the West. I think we need to be thinking about an external strategy. The amount of money borrowed, like I told people, is not a lot. I mean, if we have a debt of $38.8 billion, that is less than $14 billion. Now, if you can invest well in simply branding this country, tell the world the best and the sweetest pineapple in the world is in Uganda. The world is not ruled by reality. It's actually ruled by perceptions. Now, for us, we have reality. If we simply created the right perception about this country, our pineapples, our people, our culture, and who we are, just that, Rwanda has just spent $39 million signing a deal with Arsenal, and Ugandans are emotional because of football. But the truth is that those guys have a strategy. Every single month, there's somewhere they're appearing big time. Every single month. Because they've understood the value of branding. For you to sell any product, it starts with awareness of that product. Now, I think we need another day. Because when I start talking about tourism, I partially become emotional. Because me, I am a practitioner. I don't even need anybody to pay me to be there. Think about yourselves in terms of talking about agriculture. Agriculture for me can only work if two things are sorted out. The market and the affordable transport, means of transport to the market. I was invited by the government to Ethiopia recently. I went across Ethiopia. They have 20 airports like Entebbe. 20 airports. Now what they have done, right now they have 12 air buses, cargo buses that supply 34 countries outside Ethiopia. In this room, all of us send our house helps to go to Karori to buy foodstuffs below the production costs. Now, how do you think someone's going to sit there and just produce food for you? Now, what in that state, make sure that when you set up Uganda Airline, the first thing that you should start out with is make sure we have cargo planes that can actually ferry our food to those researched markets. Anyway, I'll talk about, but give us a day. Give us a day, and we need all these technical people to come and to explain to you what exactly we need to do. But maybe before I go off, just a second, before I go off, if you give tourism money, okay, for example, now you have given money, you've given us, okay, the minister was saying, my lowest hanging fruit is tourism. We're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 10 things. Then he says, yes, we have given you 32 billion. I thought, how can you say your cash cow is what you have given your list budget? But that said, if you have given us this 32 billion, make sure that the guys in tourism actually show results. I tell you why Rwanda. A lot of us hate talking about Rwanda. But every 21 days, the guys in tourism report to the president to tell him what they have done outside Rwanda for the sake of Rwanda's growth. We need that level of forced accountability. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Branding, branding, branding. We need to market this country. I read a statement many years ago, and each time I think about it, it makes sense. That a man who does business without marketing is like a man who winks at a lady in the dark. You're doing a lot of work, but it's not visible to anybody, yeah? So there's very little results. Okay, the questions are very many. We want to get some responses. We want to get some responses from the panel. We will come back as time does allow to get some more questions, but just so we don't lose out on the bits that we've captured, let's come back this side. Mr. Chailab.
Thank you very much, moderator, for this. I was just getting a bit concerned that we are going to get a lot of questions that we may not be able to deal with. I wanted you to make it interactive so that question, answer, interjections, and etc. I want to start from this very wonderful last presentation about more money for tourism, etc. What is in there for tourism and the rest of it? The gentleman has put forward very wonderful ideas. But my question was, I think this is why we are here. We need those ideas to be put together. How can you market a pineapple? Certainly cannot come from finance. It might have to come from you, and you're a member of a board of directors of tourism board down time.
No, I'm not.
The other one. Now, okay, that's very good.
No, I'm not.
I want us to be very open, because agriculture, tourism, name it, are all private sector, prima facie, as a starting point. Government gives you the enabling environment. So what is in there beyond the 32 billion? What's in tourism? We have electricity. You are saying Mount Kilimanjaro is one of the best places where you can go. I think I agree with you, but let's invest in power, deliver power there, and also have sources of water in certain levels of heights, so that as people hike, there may be some stopover for a wash up, etc., and that will be done under the private sector initiative. I wouldn't expect government to put, say, 1 trillion. I must commend you, by the way. If after using 11 billion Uganda shillings, you have earned us 1.4 trillion shillings, that's the highest level of efficiency of use of resources by the private sector. So if we give you now 32 billion, we now expect 32. How many 11s are there in 32? Yes. Why? Because you are a more efficient resource applier. We are the most efficient resource provider for the environment and facilities, which you as private sector cannot provide. And I want that thematic packaging to go throughout sectors, instead of arguing about the nominal amounts of money or percentages for sectors. We shall miss the point. What is it that private sector can do best in agriculture, tourism, etc., etc.? So in tourism, what the minister announced is actually a demonstration that there are some things which are lacking in terms of marketing, those exports. He mentioned it, what he's going to use that money for in tourism. He also said we shall continue using tourism to support the policy environment in which then the private sector can seize opportunities to be able to do it. If we generate electricity, the other side, that's tourism. We generate roads to the tourism sites. It's part of the road allocations. That's support to tourism. We generate water supply systems to the various areas with respect to you, the private sector, now seizing opportunities to invest in hotels, which have got all the three facilities, which are a critical element in providing excellent tourism arrangements. Also, have constructed roads crisscrossing the country, tarmac, first class. The problem now is again speed. But can we now seize opportunities as private sector to build motels along the roads? In fact, I was thinking loudly that I'm going to be one of these days an investor also in my small way on toilet facilities along the roads. Because I was coming from Gulu one time and I saw tourists, not from within Uganda, by virtue of their color. They were trying to struggle to stop somewhere and then try to help themselves. I think, can we seize opportunities of these excellent roads in promoting tourism among others to build something like motels along the roads? That cannot be surely government. etc., etc. And then the marketing people who are very smart, those of you who know the markets, tourist people, put together your ideas, engage us, call us in this engagement, kind of engagement, and see what else you want the government to do to support you to attain those ideas. I think that's a way we should be able to market ourselves in this area. Let me go to the broader earlier submissions from panelists and from the other side. And I leave Director Budget to discuss some elements of a strategic nature in terms of resource allocation and the strategies on the outcomes of strategic planning. I agree that a strategic plan must be our basic operating procedure in government. In a sector without that, and I think Parliament has also taken that very seriously, because ultimately they are the ones who say this money must go here. Finance and the executive propose, but the money must go there. But the starting point is that the strategic plan must be there. I agree with Dr. Kamulegia on that. But specifically on the broader issues, then I leave the rest to Director Budget. There was mention from my friend Godba that what is different from this budget. I want to refer him particularly on agriculture, because we are saying the linkage between the theme of the budget and the budget policy pronouncements seems not to be there. And I want to emphasize that the theme and the budget policy pronouncements are in sync with each other, because on page 11, when you're talking about, I think page 11 of the budget speech, I don't want to reread it. It starts on paragraph 32 with a strategy for commercialization of agriculture. And it goes on up to page, I think, 15 or 16. They're about defining exactly what is the link between agricultural commercialization and how is it relevant to the theme for this financial year. And in East Africa, we agreed that the theme cannot be for 1 year. It's not an event. You cannot achieve it. You'll be deceiving everybody. The theme now is going to run for at least 3 years, so that you assess the outcomes after 3 years. That, we set out to do this. How did we go out to implement this? And for us, in choosing commercialization of agriculture, we took researched information by UBOS, and also the part of the research that I said we did with EPRC, to analyze the outcome of the household census and the periodic publication from UBOS. What do they tell us? They tell us 68-point-something% of our people are in subsistence economy and basically in agriculture. That's a very big point. That's a signal. They're telling us where to go. And they're also telling us that the poverty increases that we have been seeing in the recent past are a result of the drought. Somebody say that, why are you clapping when there's rain? I think we should also thank God, at least when it rains. You thank God, because we cannot afford to be thankless to Almighty God. But they also told us in that statistic that the biggest contributor, because of these very many people, the impact was real and automatic within one financial year. That poverty was increasing in those areas where they are drought stressed. So what's the policy signal there? The policy signal there, therefore, is we cannot continue business as usual. Praying, we can continue praying, but also beyond praying, even God says so in the Bible, pray and work. Beyond praying, the policy direction that we are getting is that we should seriously look at what the honorable member from Isingiro said, using the water bodies in that area to pump out water for those farmers to irrigate and be able to have all year round production in that area where there are water bodies. Where there are no water bodies, the policy statement here also says we should be able to rain harvest when there are no floods. Now there's a problem of floods. Very soon there'll be a problem of drought in the parts of Teso and wherever where I come from. We need to dam up the areas. And what are the outcomes for last year with respect to this? They are on page, I think, 15, going to page 16. You can see there the solar pumps which were promised in 9 districts, Godba. They are there on paragraph, let me put on my, I don't want to read the budget speech. I know you are very busy, you didn't sleep. But I think page 15, the accountability of the irrigation schemes. Page 16, I think. Page 16, I think. Paragraph 38. Yeah, paragraph 38. You can see under Roman 3, the valley tanks which are constructed. You can see under paragraph 4, the small-scale irrigation solar-powered systems. And I can confirm, I come from Amuria. I mean Soroti and Amuria. The two are working very well. And for last season, you would see women. And I think there was even a documentary running through during the budget speech. You can see women in those areas. From one of the honorable members, Honorable Chair to be specific, we can go there. You find that women throughout last season, when the rest of Teso was suffering from drought, women, even in the dry season, were producing high-value vegetables. And instead of supplying them from Mbale, which is where we used to get it from, because of the wet season, they were supplying now the larger part to Amuria and then also Soroti. So these are the kind of demonstration. This was a start. We cannot do everything at a go. And we expect that from these kind of examples and the maintenance of these kind of allocations, we can now go to other areas. And the strategy for commercialization of agriculture, in order to promote inclusive growth, is hinged on the zoning concept, which has already developed, and that's new. And the zoning concept is not new. It was done. But after zoning, they are going to get nucleus farmers at parish level. In order to have examples like the Godbus, from where then is expected the farmers can, other people can learn from the parish, and once it's cascaded, then the intention is right from the farm level, you link that output and increase productivity with the rural growth centers where then electricity now has gone. That's a linkage now we're starting with as we industrialize. That will then add maybe intermediate processing at that level of that output and then pass it on to the regional level where again the strategy is to have regional processing plants under UDC. Somebody talked about UDC, where government can and then working with the private sector to establish that kind of thing. Then we shall have done 4 things. For inclusivity, the household level will be able to engage in meaningful agricultural production at farm level with improved technologies of herbicides, fertilizers, and as well as irrigation, so that they engage throughout the year. The output of which will increase the household incomes. The value chain addition will create the additional increased earnings for the entire economy. It will engage people in employment. You'll be tackling employment, and you're talking about job creation. And you'll be industrializing on the basis of the signal that UBOS has told us, 68.something% should be able to come into active production and engagement in the economy throughout the year. I took a little bit of time on that in order to drive home the link between the policy and what we are doing with respect to the policy statements here. I think that the budget can now talk about the detailed issues about strategy and then the output and performance of the sectors, and then what else we need to do with respect to the key issues which are proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. I want to make maybe 1 or 2 comments. Yesterday, I attended a meeting of the private sector, a similar meeting discussing post-budget issues. And of course, listening in now, this morning, I think there's general consensus that going forward, what we need is actually implementation. It is actually action and implementation. So the messages, I think, are coming out very clearly. Now, specifically on these issues, which were actually raised by a number of speakers this morning, either on the KPIs, key performance indicators, or targets. I know Mr. Kamuriga did mention it, and also our colleague from EPRC did talk about it. Now, we have a system called the program budgeting system, PBS, which is anchored on program-based budgeting. Now, the whole essence of the program budgeting system and program-based budgeting is to ensure that we have a framework that helps to link the budgetary resources to the service delivery outcomes. Of course, outputs and then eventually outcomes. Now, we believe that this is important because before you hold accounting officers accountable for the results, you must be able to understand the link between the resources the accounting officers have and the results which they are expected to generate. So in terms of the framework, I want to assure you all that we actually have put in place a good framework that becomes a basis for measuring the performance of the accounting officers. So going forward, I think what is critical now for us as Ministry of Finance and also as government, and indeed all of you actually, is to ensure that this performance framework is implemented. And how does this performance framework get implemented? Is by demanding and holding the accounting officers accountable for delivering the results for which the money has been provided. You definitely had the Minister of Finance pronouncing and actually directing the Secretary of the Treasury that going forward, he must double the demand that has been putting on accounting officers in terms of accounting for the resources and also accounting for the service delivery results. So we are not just simply looking at the number of children who are enrolled in school, or no, we are actually going a step forward, asking an accounting officer tell us how many children have completed primary 7, for example? You know, how many children have passed at primary 7? Because this is actually what is going to enhance the education outcomes, not simply having so many, you know, children in primary school, because you can actually have many children in primary school when they're actually dropping out or when they are not passing. You must have seen in some districts, yesterday we were discussing, and you realize there are a number of districts where for actually many years, you find actually practically they have not had any grade 1 primary child, you know, passing P7. So the question one would be asking is it lack of resources? Does it actually mean that this district doesn't get resources, as much resources as any other district? And actually when you dig deep, especially for the researchers, Sarah Sewanyan and my friend Ramadan, you actually discover that the problem is not resources. In a number of cases, it's actually, you know, the way the management is done in that particular district. So on our side, that's why we are emphasizing that point. We are saying, yes, we must engage, we must ensure that accounting officers, and of course even the political leaders themselves actually, you know, are held accountable for whatever they are expected to do in delivering these results. So I want to say that the framework is definitely there, and we are using that framework to ensure that we have a performance management system. Now, in terms of
one more minute, Chief.
Sorry?
Just 1 more minute.
Oh, only one.
Yeah, want to see how we get a lot more feedback.
No, you can imagine I've invited the man now he's giving me just
you
one
put
minute.
him in charge.
And
it exercises.
You can see how ironical it is.
but yes, I think it's sufficient.
Exactly. Now the means is no. But just aside, I think I wanted to talk about briefly the issue of monitoring. DST has talked about, I mean, if you look at the budget speech, traditionally the Minister of Finance starts by accounting to the public, you know, what has been achieved. But beyond that, we here in this ministry, we have a budget monitoring and accountability unit. And every year we keep enhancing their capacity, both in terms of the human resource, but also in terms of their coverage of the service delivery areas. So going forward, we are going to ensure that the budget monitoring unit continues, you know, to go down to the service delivery and actually pick these points. And we are also going to step further by, you know, engaging, working closely with civil society organizations for areas where we cannot reach, so that civil society itself can go down and tell us what they are finding in terms of challenges of delivering services. So lastly, moderator.
Before you go last, I think still on that point of monitoring under BAMAU, we have also now expanded the mandate of BAMAU to include monitoring revenue performance as well. Yeah. Because a budget is both revenue and how you expect to spend it. So that we strengthen the link between revenue and expenditure in accounting for results. So the BAMAU unit will be strengthened so that each policy measure will now be measured upon or against the assumptions under which that revenue measure was made first, so that we don't have a lazy approach of saying, oh, there's a revenue shortfall. Then you start theorizing about where did the revenue shortfall come from. No. We want now to know each month. And I think for some new tax measures, we're going to start each day to see where guys are trying to dodge their taxes, so that monitoring arrangement is intricately linked with the pain with which you have tax payment and application of those taxes or borrowed money to service delivery. That's the point I wanted to rub in. Thank you. Sorry.
The other point I wanted to make, to comment on, is this issue of balancing between social services and infrastructure, which I believe is a good point. Now, if you reflect backwards, in the late 90s to early 2000s, when we implemented the Poverty Eradication Action Plan, a lot of resources, just like you said, a lot of resources went into the social services. And of course, we had a decline in poverty. But then what we also found is that the declining poverty was actually not accompanied by high rates of growth, especially interventions which support the private sector and also eventually translate into job creation. So that became a challenge. And that's why government actually changed the strategy. If you look at the NDP 1 and the NDP 2, in order to achieve faster structural transformation, we had to review the strategy and ensure that we build the infrastructure, you know, the basic infrastructure that would support growth of the economy, especially supporting the private sector. Now, the challenge we are seeing now is essentially what you are raising. We have definitely spent, over the years, spent a lot of resources in infrastructure. Of course, the population is growing. Okay, so now I think going forward, and I think the minister hinted it in his speech, going forward now, again we have to review that balancing between spending on infrastructure, particularly the maintenance of the infrastructure, but also freeing resources or creating fiscal space, to ensure that we support the social services. But we also, we definitely need, I think, in this gathering also to discuss the issue of the high rate of population. Because whatever resources you are going to invest in, as long as the rate of population is as it is now, the resources will not catch up with the rate of population. So we'll actually be running behind the population. So yes, we need to do the balancing act to ensure that we put resources in social services, but we also must address some of those fundamental issues. So lastly, on the budget, because I think somehow some people are also criticizing us at why are we having this post-budget debate. Yes, it is true we are having a post-budget debate, but it is also true that we are having a pre-budget debate. No, that's not true. Because we have held discussions. I can definitely confirm the private sector did make an input, and yesterday in their own meeting they did confirm that when they did a stock taking, they actually found that we have taken 73% of the proposals which they made. 73%. Mr. Badagawa is here. That's a D2. Yes, and the analysis was done by the private sector. So the private sector did make an analysis on account of the recommendations they made on the budget, and the minister has been able to take 73% of the recommendations they took. So I want to confirm that we definitely carry out pre-budget consultations. We definitely need to deepen the consultations. In fact, in my opinion, one of the recommendations I would want us to carry forward is both to have this engagement as we're having in Ministry of Finance also replicated in the aligned ministries. Because if you are Mr. Amos Wekesa, this is the debate you bring here. Because I even challenged him when he was a member of Uganda Tourism Board. Because he was telling me, he said, why don't you actually monitor the number of tourists per day? And the question I was telling him, you are a member of Uganda Tourism Board. What stops you actually from making that as part of your working arrangement as Uganda Tourism Board? That every month you'll be able, how much money do you need? I'm sure you can even sponsor it actually from his pocket. How much money do you need? How much money do you need? How much money do you need? How much money do you need to ensure that this information, because it's also actually part of accountability. So I definitely agree we need to enhance accountability. But the point I'm making is wherever we are, especially the private sector, members of civil society and members of parliament, let's ensure that all this debate that is happening here is also replicated in the ministries, in the MDAs. Because as you all said, what needs to be done now is implementation. The strategy is right, everybody agrees. So taking forward the strategy is what? Implementation. And I raise my case, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, thank you, Kenneth. Let's have a quick communication from Jim and then we shall proceed.
I thought we're trying as much as possible to be a listening post, to take in a lot more views from private sector and the participants. And the idea is eventually going forward to be able to plan from an informed position. So Mr. Wekesa's, Amos's points are well taken and our people are recording them. However, I thought we would just reflect on a few things. He's mentioned that we are falling short of pushing our pineapples. Just an example. And I recall, and I thought I would mention this so that we contextualize the importance of research and the policy. Because we're trying to get that out of the way, and we are attempting to throw money at every problem. So give us more money, give us more money. And it will never work that way. I'll give you a simple example, which I personally experienced. Recently, you remember we had a campaign around the chapati. Remember the chapati, the one gear style chapati? Rolex. Yeah. Now, all of us know that in Uganda, Rolex makes all the sense. But beyond our borders, there's something called shawarma. It's here. What is the difference between Rolex and shawarma? What's the difference between Rolex and Mexican taco? They are international. And all we did was to push our Rolex thinking that it's the one which is going to. So did we undertake the necessary research? And I think that's what our colleagues are talking to. We need to really know where we are throwing money and in which direction. Second example, pineapple. Very sweet, very good, very big. No question about it. I interacted with Amos at one time and I told him, Amos, that actually works. But where are we pushing the pineapples to? We are pushing them to Morrison's, we are pushing them to supermarkets globally. And what are they looking for? Shelf life. In our own Nakasero market, our pineapple does not live beyond 4 days and it's spoiled. It's organic but it doesn't live beyond 4 days. Secondly, and that is not what will happen. You remember with all these transportation things, challenges we have, and hence the cargo plane. Secondly, the handling. Thirdly, the weight. Internationally, they pack those little things from Mexico, from Costa Rica, from Israel, and probably they are tasteless. But the market out there has been used to eating them, consuming them for more than 50 years, and they have a guaranteed supply. The same goes for bananas. What these people in Morrison's told me when we tried to push them, they said, look, Jim, you've brought us pineapples and avocados. They told me avocados so good, but the market is used to packaging 5 little small avocados in a pack. And they told me, all we need, show us in Uganda a 50-acre plantation of avocado, so that we throw 10 million pounds on the marketing campaign to change the consumer mindset in UK. And frankly speaking, there was nothing. Now, the research, the interrelationship of all of these systems to grow, to market, to transport, everything is interlinked. And therefore, I do not personally believe that throwing money at one thing is the solution. And hence, we cannot say, give us money in this sector without the basic research. Having said that, I wanted to request that we go back to the realities. We'll dig deep. Let's bring out these issues. We throw them at the policy makers so that they start cooking this meal, so that by the time it comes to the table, it's actually ready to go. Otherwise, if we miss all of the interlinkages, the synergies across the production line, we'll have missed the point. Now, you may have heard the DB, Godbar, Ramadan, and all these people discussing. And they kept saying, we've discussed. I want to tell you, we did not have a discussion before this one. But they happen to belong to something called Filtered. And, and they have their discussions where they argue a lot. This discussion is going to continue online and offline. And what I'm requesting for, let's get back this discussion in the room, and we get points from partners who are on this in the room, so that we get the feedback. The guilty party for Filtered is a man called Nambale, and he's seated just across. He has just walked in. Thank you very much. So can we now hear from stakeholders, as I hand back to the moderator? There are those stakeholders who have not spoken to us, so that we pick all these ideas and we have an informed discussion.
Thank you, Jim. You have made my work a little bit easier. Minister of Finance, I know the room is filled with many folks from Ministry of Finance. Some of you are saying it's because there were no people, so one of the big people went to the offices and pulled people and said, come and fill the spaces. No, they are here to listen, and so it's good that they get to listen from these different people. The views might not sound very comfortable, but it's okay. Let's hear them out, and we see what happens. Yes, ma'am. You just tell us your name, and then I'm going to limit the submissions to a minute. It will be a quick one because we have limited time that we are meant to be live on TV. So let's make them short.
Thank you. My name is Jeno Kotpitek from the Uganda Registration Services Bureau. And I'd like to comment on the intervention by government on the growth of the private sector credit. The statistics from Ministry of Industry is that over 90% of businesses are MSMEs. And from Bank of Uganda statistics is that they use their own money, and hence there is not much growth, especially since the banks want land, and many of these people don't have land. So what the intervention here is that we are setting up a system so that these small businesses can use movable property as security. We're going to set up the movable properties securities registry, and in that we would give we're targeting mainly the money lenders, the SACCOs which have a lot of money, and microfinance, to give them the comfort that if, for instance, somebody uses a phone for a Rolex business and they need just 200,000, they would register that in the registry. And if they go to any other microfinance or financial institution, those finance people would be able to check and therefore give comfort that maybe this is either already taken or we can still give credit against that. We have a bill which is in Parliament already, and we plead to our parliamentarians when the bill comes to the floor. It's currently with the committee. Please support that. And then with the support of Ministry of Finance, we're going to buy the system. It's going to be online 24/7 so that it eases credit and grows businesses, especially for the MSMEs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, may I say that in our submissions, I know there's been a lot of lamentations all over the place, but can we hear some solutions? Because we need to see how we aid these people that put together the budget and plan. Let's see how we help them with some solutions. Somebody gave themselves the mic before I gave them. All right, go for it.
Thank you, Joel. It would be very unfair to talk about industrialization without the manufacturers talking. Joel.
What's your name, sir?
My name is Alan Senyondo. I work with Uganda Manufacturers Association. Now, I didn't remove my coat to come and fight. So we are not in fighting mode. I just want to put forth the conundrum and dilemma manufacturing faces in this country. A conundrum because of the following. We're talking about agro-industrialization. The same situation my brother Wekesa has just talked about, and my brother Gobi has just talked about. So we have to do industrialization, and therefore we need products from agriculture. Now, the agriculture sector faces a dilemma. It's called immiserating growth. The more we plant and the more we harvest, the less the price of products. How do you solve that one, Joel? Very easy. Put up a good cooperative system where the producers put their produce in the cooperative, which can then market their goods, which then the manufacturers can consume. Simple and pure. Now you're telling us the roads will be constructed. Thank you very much. The electricity is going to be given to us. Thank you very much. The taxes, my brother from URA, I thank you very much. I saw the taxes, what you did today in the New Vision. Thank you very much. Now, the dilemma. So we're going to be asked to produce these goods. Sell them where? My brother from Parliament has just said, buy Uganda, build Uganda. We want to ask one help just from government. Buy our produce. Local content in everything you do. Now they're going to tell us, but you don't have quality. Manufacturing is quite a difficult place to be. So, how do you develop quality? I want to ask anyone in this country who has ever come with quality before quantity. If you want quality, first produce, then get the quality. You can't get the quality before the production. So can you allow us to produce so that we can then provide you with the quality you so seemingly deserve? The submission is very simple. In our relation with the budget process, can we go back to the farmers, put them in producer cooperatives, let them produce, we will buy, but on the other side, please help and buy the produce. Or else, the produce will not go to the UK, those ananas won't go to the UK, the avocado won't go to the UK, because they need some kind of agro-processing. Thank you very much.
Buy Uganda, build Uganda. Okay, let's hear from the gentleman right behind you there.
Thank you very much.
In a minute.
Yes, I'm Musa Mugo. I work with the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. Also, I want to thank the Minister of Finance for the opportunity. One, I wanted to inform Director Budget on the issue for education. Committed to provide capitation grants of 10,000 in primary schools. But right now, actually, schools are receiving around 6,000, 7,000, not even 10,000. Even secondary schools, they are receiving less, and I think that's the inequality we are talking about. Because when you look at secondary school for youth, they said 41,000. They receive around 35,000 shillings. For A level, it is about 81,000. They receive around 70,000. Then the other issue which I want to talk about, the costing of service delivery in Uganda. You look at the amount of money we spend, government of Uganda spend on construction of a classroom block. It is far, far above which you can even use to construct like more buildings. You go in a primary school and they will tell you they spent around 70 million or 80 million classroom block. But you can even, and you ask yourself, where did all this money go? 70 million on a 2 classroom block. Then lastly, on the issue of debt sustainability, I think maybe we need to increase transparency. You realize on the issue of budget, actually when you compare Uganda to other countries, the budget process, we are more transparent compared to other countries. But we have the issue of debt processing to Parliament and the Ministry of Finance. In fact, one of the areas where Parliament is more effective is on the issue of approving loans. Today is Tuesday, you can present a loan today, and on Friday, it will be on the floor of Parliament being approved. You see, you can borrow today. Once you approve a loan, you have committed yourself. It is not like a law. You can approve it, you can pass a bill today. But tomorrow when there are problems, you can go back and amend. For a loan, you cannot. I want to propose one thing. Let us improve the way we process our loans. For instance, as we process the budget, let the government say this is the amount of money we are going to borrow. And we know the source of that money. They go to Parliament once, civil sector brings its views, private sector brings its views, and other stakeholders, and it gets passed once and for all. But almost every day in Parliament, actually, you will find that for every week, there are about 2 loans being presented in Parliament. For that, you cannot have a better way of managing your debt in such a manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I saw a hand behind there, Lily Jarova, just behind you. I'm the one directing. Let's work together. Hey.
I want to join the rest in appreciating the invitation to be part of this, and also appreciation to Ministry of Finance for adding on the budget for promoting tourism, and also waiving off the taxes, by the way, for the tourist boats and vehicles. We appreciate that. We do not take it for granted, and you getting to appreciate what we are doing in promoting the economy is being seen. And just to add on what Amos has said, I think one of the strategies that we really need to get clear is that tourism is a multifaceted industry. If we carefully align ourselves to the other sectors, there's a lot more that we will be able to achieve. We can package tourism with agriculture. There's agro-tourism. There is cultural tourism that we're not promoting enough. There's health tourism. Most of us who can afford are rushing to India. Why? Because they have positioned themselves, their tourism in the health sector. Talk about education sector. It's one area that we are still struggling with. We have a challenge in having quality service delivered to the tourists in terms of customer care and the rest. But look, we are importing labor from Kenya. The chefs, most of the hotels we have here are employing Kenyans as their chefs. If we can improve on that, we will be providing more employment to our own. And we can even export them, just like Kenya is exporting, not only to East Africa, to the rest of the world as well. So I thought I would just make that point that tourism can be properly aligned to achieve more, not just for the tourism sector, but for the rest of the important sectors of the economy as well. But also just to appreciate the Ministry of Finance for considering, Uganda Airlines, the development. That's again we are moving in a good direction. But at this point, like Amos already mentioned, the traffic is increasing. It's a nightmare going through Entebbe Airport right now. So there's need just to improve, to fast track, other aerodromes development. Yes, I know there's something already happening in Hoima district, but it needs to be fast tracked. Otherwise, we're just going to be stuck with people having nowhere to access the country from.
And lastly? And lastly,
yes, just to emphasize the point of promotion. Yes, we have the PR firms that have helped to increase the tourist number within the last 1 year that they have helped. But there's a lot more. So the increment, yes, is appreciated, but there's a lot more. If we are going to achieve 4 million tourists coming in the next 2 to 3 years, as the target is, we need to expand on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let me pick some hands from here, then I'll come back this side. Yes, gentlemen, then we'll hear from Moses down here.
My name is Rime Mayanja Semakula. I would like to comment on the MP's comment that we don't love Uganda. I beg to disagree. And moderator, please allow me to at least mix in a little bit of Uganda. I do believe
which company are you from, or which
I'm
entity?
from Kena Enterprise. Like I said, I beg to disagree. As Ugandans, we do love Uganda. And I believe that it's not that we don't want to pay tax. We do love to pay taxes. And as a matter of fact, as of yesterday, from the testimony of the CG, she informed us that our taxes have been tripling almost each and every year. That means that we have been paying taxes. But as you know, it has to be a quid pro quo, mpang way. Services are not really good. Tulina okukikkiriza nti services zaffe si nnungi, zirina okuba improved okugeza. Tulina eddwaliro limu lyokka erya referral hospital, which is Mulago. I believe that hospital should be a state of the art because we only have one. But as you know, all of you, it is really in a sorry state. Banangi services tezitutuukako.
Gentlemen, I request that you stick to English. We want to make sure everyone in the room and those watching at home can understand.
I believe everybody understands Luganda.
No, that's not true. That's not true. So please wind up in 30 seconds using English. I understand Luganda, but not everyone here, not everyone watching at home understands it. So let's not take things for granted.
Going back to the point, we all know what the root cause is, and that is corruption. It takes me to great pains that we haven't mentioned that word, yet we all know that it has killed us as a country. Uganda is counted as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. That affects the efficiency you are talking about here. We can't be efficient if you have failed to fight corruption. I love, in fact, I do adore our president, Yoweri Museveni. He is a fighter, and he's a self-proclaimed Sabarwanyi. But unfortunately, he has failed to fight corruption. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Chailab, omanyi Oluganda? Olutegera bulungi? Tutono nnyo. I was about to ask Moses, so you see why we need to use one ubiquitous language, eh? Okay, Moses, in 30 seconds, then we'll hear from Honorable here. Then I'll move to the other side. I'm sorry, the way this place was structured, it is so that that place is biased.
Thank you very much. My name is Moses Mlondo from Vision Group. I think the Ministry of Finance and Parliament are not doing enough to help the country, especially on the issue of wastage. We are spending hundreds of billions of money renting premises for government entities, and yet we have a lot of idle land, like the land we have in Naguru and Nakawa. Part of it recently was given to Aga Khan. In the budget framework paper, the ministry made commitment to make radical reforms to eliminate wastage, and we expected that we would see these radical measures announced in the national budget, but they were not mentioned. We spend billions of money on travels abroad. Recently, Magufuli in Tanzania stopped most of the travels abroad and said, whatever information you want, get it from our embassies abroad. So you also promised us to merge some entities in the budget framework paper, and we expected to hear radical reforms in that area, that some entities that are doing almost the same work have been merged, but we didn't hear those radical reforms. And lastly, both Parliament and different stakeholders, including Mr. Godiba there, they did some research, moved around the country consulting Ugandans, and they came up with the compact document, the Citizens Manifesto, where majority of the Ugandans and different stakeholders were calling for government to increase the budget for local governments to about 35% of the national budget. In the budget that has just been read, local governments have been given only 3 trillion, which is just 9% of the national budget, and yet these are the entities that serve the masses. In Kenya, 40% of their 114 trillions, which is 45 trillions, has been allocated to regional governments. But for us, out of our 32.7 trillion, we've given local governments only 3 trillion. So can we make a commitment even from here, perhaps beginning the next budgeting process? Because even Parliament has already made commitment on this time and again. And even Parliament is not using its power, because both the Budget Act and the Public Finance Management Act give you power to appropriate. So we would like to see the percentage going to the local governments increasing from a mere 9%. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Let's hear from Honorable here.
Thank you very much. We have all listened and digested what we have gone through, but I would like to add in some 2 or 3 things. I thank the government of Uganda, the Ministry of Finance, and other ministries for the efforts they have taken, despite the fact that many are criticizing the Ministry of Finance. We are criticizing each other, and we are like fighting over that. But meanwhile, many riches are passing through us and going outside. Why? I'm saying like this because I was given a chance. I went to study in China on a scholarship. As a scholarship student, I studied, finished, stayed there, worked there. I went down into earth, and I learned a lot of things. China developed 30 years since the time when I was there. They leaped from the poorest economy to the second in the world, and I saw everything. So I also tried very much to come and bring all these techniques to our people. How? China was a very poor country, but they organized themselves very well through agriculture, industry, and other things, and they developed. Because of time, let me just go on the main point. China developed because of agriculture. And what I saw when I came to Uganda, because I made a research for the goods which are coming from Uganda to China, I discovered one thing. Our fish in Lake Victoria, there is a very great potential where we have lost trillions of US dollars from Lake Victoria without the Minister of Fishing knowing about it. How? We have a Nile patch. No, okay, Minister of Agriculture and Fishing. We have a minister. We have people who are concerned. So we have lost billions, trillions of US dollars from the Nile patch. A Nile patch has got something called fish mole in it. I was taken to Korea, Taiwan, Japan, and that product was coming from Uganda. Good enough, the government trained me. I became a very good Chinese speaker. You can check from Google Mascapolo, for instance, in Beijing, you'll see what I did there. So I discovered Uganda has been losing trillions of US dollars from Lake Victoria because of Enuni. Details I'll talk about it in Parliament. I'm not going to talk it in details because there's no time. Apart from that, I saw the South Koreans, Japanese, Taiwanese, they harvest their human hair. When they sell it to African countries, Latin America, they get trillions of US dollars. They sell to our women. They go there and bring hair. Then I started thinking, what about us? When I came back home, I saw Chinese, Koreans, Japanese, they harvest billions of US dollars from their own bodies. So we people, we lose trillions of US dollars. Somebody has just talked about building washrooms or toilets on the highways. That man is very clever. I've forgotten his name. I didn't write down. Who? Yes. My friend in China, my colleagues in China, somebody who is collecting waste products from human dung and urine, they make trillions of US dollars. Like Beijing, where I stayed for 20 years, they harvest trillions of US dollars. Urine, when they purify it, a jerrycan, 20 liters, is around 150, like Ugandan shillings. It's like $150. Then the gas which they get from our human dung for cooking, then lighting, then for agricultural products, they get trillions of US dollars. So because of time, we shall talk about all these things next time. But we people, when we look around ourselves, like the area where I come from, my district is Namisindwa. We grow coffee on the slopes of Mount Elgon. And when I went to China, Japan, I get a small cup and I buy it at 30,000 Uganda shillings. When I looked back, I said, I cannot stay there. Let me go to the golden land, which is Uganda. Okay. So if we sit together and plan, our national debt can be eradicated in a very short time, like even 10 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable. Now, I know some of you are saying Chinese make money from these things because there are very many, 1.5 billion, but we can try. All right, let's move to this side now. Hear from that gentleman. I saw Dr. Fred Muhumuza, Honorable Mukitale. We are coming. Let's be very brief.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My name is Charles Sopolot. I'm a policy analyst, also communication specialist. Now, we are talking about innovative ways of generating revenue and cutting, One of them, which is so easy, is for the ministries to get out of Kampala and be set in other regions, so that also other regions can benefit from this money, which is in the Bank of Uganda. For instance, what is the Minister of Agriculture doing here in Kampala? Take it to Gulu, take it to Teso, and you mitigate the floods which are ravaging us there. The other thing is, as a policy analyst, the most important thing is about problem identification. The problem with Uganda and most of our policies is the identification of problems. We just jump into things, PEEP, PAP, NADS, this and that. We have not yet identified the problems. So if we could begin with the basics, identify the problem, and in most cases we are addressing wrong issues using the little resources we have. Going forward, would we, as a country, have a conversation with the grassroots and identify the problems which are a priority in this country? One of the problems is corruption, as somebody said. Corruption is, even nepotism is one of the big corruption tendencies in this country. how do we address the issue of nepotism, the issue of clientelism, and the issue of prebendalism, where those in power think that even their relatives are entitled to our money. You know?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Fred Muhumuza.
Thank you very much, Minister of Finance, for the opportunity to engage this discussion. I think the devil is always in the detail. I'll be happy to engage the detail because I can see the intentions are there, but I think some of them are not so well explained, especially when you talk about the debt sustainability strategy, where you intend to scale down the domestic borrowing for infrastructure. I think that's already not the right thing to do. Domestic borrowing is short-term, infrastructure is long-term, so we need to sort out that and finance infrastructure from other sources. And also the intention to do so over the medium term. I'm not sure what you mean by medium term, because I don't see Uganda reducing its infrastructure agenda over the medium term, if we're talking about the same medium term that I know. Because at least for the next 10 to 15 years, we'll still be engaged in a lot of infrastructure investments. So if we go by up to that period of 10, 15 years, still doing domestic borrowing, we would have done more damage. I'm glad to look at the domestic arrears. I think these are becoming quite a big hindrance. We have always known government to be a risk-free partner to deal with. But I think from the banking sector, my interaction with the people there, you can now no longer present a government contract and be funded from the banking sector, because they fear government defaults, creates arrears, and you have a problem. So you might actually be crippling the private sector in two ways, through the domestic borrowing, but also failing to pay them, and yet this is supposed to be a private sector-led growth. So I will be happy to engage the documents that you have put across, the domestic resource mobilization, and also the domestic debt. For me, those are key. Then growth will be a default in its own right. But the intention is clear. I must congratulate you for linking agriculture with manufacturing. Okay. I think that for me is very key. It's a good move that was done. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Let's hear from Honorable Mukitale.
Thank you so much. NTV, I was able to listen in, even when before I came here from the Speaker's chamber where I was doing some work for the Vulisa people. Thanks to NTV. But since I came here, I've been struggling to see what is made in Uganda in the Ministry of Finance conference room. I've only seen one chair, and it's more beautiful than the ones you have. So, Minister of Finance, you are the first ones to be condemned.
There is a podium here.
Yes, the last time I was in President's office, I was in State House, they all have imported Malaysian furniture. So who is to blame for this country having a challenge? You know? So boo-boo, local content. I'm saying this when we are about to invest over $20 billion to actualize First Oil. Parliament of Uganda made a 48% target of low content. Are we about to achieve it? If the lead ministries are not buying Uganda. Japan, South Africa first closed their economies. Economies in hard times close their economies, do inward-looking policies, buy local, give yourself tenders. Quality only comes after quantity. For all economists, you know that. Quality comes after quantity. That's the basic for an economics in S6, you know, in senior 6, I think. So let's buy Uganda, promote Uganda quantity, and then we can get capacity to export to our neighbors. The first point I had was that.
And the second and last point, Honorable?
Oh, we are lamenting about lack of enough money, and we spend a lot of time discussing expenditure. Why don't we first discuss more about reducing wastage? We have enough money right now to transform this economy if we did away with wastage. I don't care if it means reducing parliament. Article 178 of the Constitution provided for regional tier governments
Why are we still creating more districts when actually we should have regional governments yesterday with a few regional cities, and these regional cities with industrial parks, and I'm talking about service industrial park, not Namamve, which takes 20 years to get a road and electricity, you know, and these regional cities will create densities for investors who go in those regions as producer nucleus cooperatives, so that if you produce a product 1, 2, 3 in a region, you have a market within a region. Otherwise, the peasants who are in NADS cannot, there is no trading, one pig, one chicken. And I want also to ask a question. Who among you in finance believes that believed NADS would work? Who believed prosperity for all would work? So why do we put money where we know it's not going to work? Let us focus and concentrate our little resources into what we know can work: proven performance, progressive farmer, nucleus cooperatives, and find some money for cooperative bank. Because to scatter this money in youth livelihood, and I'm quoting now the president, the money we have in youth livelihood or operation wealth creation, women entrepreneur, is enough money to fund a serious cooperative bank. And that's what can help the country. Finally, and most important, Director Budget talked about it, and it was left. You cannot discuss this economy becoming middle income and transforming without looking at the population dynamics. In 20 years, we are 100 million dependents. 100 million. How I wish we invested in vocationalization and skilling so that we can get a demographic dividend. Because the only way these citizens, the very many we are producing, thanks to Kabaka, the president, and Naduli, because they are all for more, producing more. The only way we can turn them into assets from liability is by skilling them. The children of peasants, if they became plumbers and carpenters, they don't need to live on some land. They can live vertically on floor 48 as a plumber, as an ICT boy, on a condominium property, and that's the thinking we should be having. So for me, my request is that let us seriously look at land reform, radical land reforms in terms of cities and securing land for serious investors in agriculture and fiscal planning. That's the way to go for a country transformer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our time is up, I'm afraid, so we are going to do this. I'll give 1.5 minutes to Godba and Francis each to make some quick final remarks, and then Mr. Chailap will wrap it up in maybe 2 minutes or so. Godba?
Thanks very much, Joe. I think I'll just make 2 quick comments. One is the stimulus. What is the economic stimulus in the budget? Because we can do so many things. Because for me, linking to the point that Amos raised on the dollar value from tourism and agriculture, my view is that we have so many human beings that do not constitute part of our market. Most of those people are in agriculture. I think that this country must be able to find a smart way of investing in agriculture to move people from agriculture to tourism, to industry, to wherever. I don't think that there is a shortcut. Because for me, even when we talk about poverty, I don't want to talk like an economist. Because if you have over 75% of your population producing only 23 or 24% of your wealth, you are supposed to be poor. So you don't want to make all kinds of statistics explaining the poverty. The last point that I would make is really related to I thought that part of the discussion also more or less moved to the academic side, because me, as I said, I'm a farmer. So I do farming. What do you do as a farmer? You open up land. If you are growing matoke, it takes you at least a minimum of 1.5 years to cut your first bunch. So practically it is difficult for you to say, I am going to go and borrow money from a bank and do matoke farming. Because the bank wants you to pay from the first month. So where are you getting the money to pay? I don't find that practical. I spend about, at some point I spend about 3 million shillings to cut grass and carry it and get it to my plantation. Because if you don't mulch over 4 acres of a plantation, it is very difficult to rely on weeding. And then that means that I have to start thinking of using pesticides, and I want to do purely organic stuff because I don't want to contaminate my things. And then you go to the labor. So in other words, and I can tell you, I have tried to work with my community in my village to do poultry. The politicians will always say, do poultry, do beekeeping, but you never know where do you find the bees, because they all rely on luck, act of God. You do poultry. I have tried poultry and failed, and because it has its own dynamics. So sometimes when you hear us, when we come here and talk, and then you realize actually someone talked about the reality of things is different from the conversation that we're having. And I think so that's why Minister of Finance, and I was whispering to Patrick here, Minister of Finance needs to use more of the informal conversations, not structured meetings and committees and whatever. You want to get Patrick or Kenneth to say, let me have some 10 or 15 people, ordinary people, that maybe meet with me every month or every quarter and discuss what are things that are working, what are not working, how can they work better. Because the things that how you monitor this actually is not so much on the structured. It is more on the informal. Where me as a farmer come and tell you, Patrick, you are putting so much money, 900 billion in agriculture, but where are you putting it? If you wanted, finally, it's I think it's Ramadan who talked about the structural reforms. Where are the structural reforms? I keep on praying that one day I have to be the president in this country, and in my first 100 days, the guys who move files, personnel files in the Ministry of Public Service, they would be here under Ministry of Finance. There would never be a ministry called Public Service. Because I don't want people to be there moving files. Because what do they do? What is their production? What is the value addition? The second one is that...
And the last one.
Yes, and the last one. That Ministry of Agriculture, if you wanted to change the way we do business, you want to be able to reduce Ministry of Agriculture to like half of what it is now. Because agriculture should be done in the districts. In fact, if you look at your budget now, if you look at the budget for agriculture, and you see what is spent by this thing called the Ministry of Agriculture, and then what is spent down there, you realize that the distortion starts from there. And that is where we need the reform. That's why I said, Ministry of Finance can use its leverage because you have the concentration of knowledge, of expertise, and of time. There is nobody in this country who spends more time thinking about budget and money than you guys.
Okay.
I think you can use that leverage to try to change some of these things. Thank you.
Thank you. Clearly the campaign season has begun. Francis, let's hear from you. You'll also tell us which position you're vying for. Vice President, Minister of Finance. In a minute and a half, Francis.
My comment is going to be on taxation. It's quite concerning to see that the level of domestic revenue to budget financing is going down, despite the fact that revenue actually is growing in nominal terms. And I think at this point we all need to look at ourselves and we think about our role as citizens and the contributions we are making. When we rely on borrowing or appropriation in aid, for me as a Ugandan, as a citizen, I believe then we are really losing the initiative, but most importantly failing to own our development agenda. So it's very, very important all of us as Ugandans pay our taxes. I think it's really important to understand who does what. It's very easy for us to sit here and point fingers at the ladies and gentlemen in the Ministry of Finance. They're technocrats, but the way I understand the way the process works, gentlemen, the way I understand the process works, they sit and make proposals, whether it's in terms of the tax laws or the proposed allocation to the different sectors. It's the honorable members of parliament who eventually decide whether there's going to be tax on mobile money or not. It's the honorable members of parliament who decide whether agriculture gets 600 billion or 400 billion. They represent all of us, and they have to be held accountable. We've got tax laws which are skewed, and they actually result in people not paying taxes, and they justify it. People ask, what do we get for our taxes? And I tell them, pay the taxes first, and then demand accountability. We have tax laws that have exempted people who make the laws from paying tax. We have tax laws that exempt people who enforce the law from paying taxes. The police, prisons, diesel, ESO, they don't pay taxes on their income. We have tax laws which have been interpreted by the judiciary in such a way that if the judges are made to pay tax, they're being seen to be at a disadvantage in the sense that their money is being reduced. And that's not good for the independence of the judiciary. So we lose the moral authority of asking people in Uganda to pay taxes when at the very, very top we've designed laws that have exempted people in power. We have exemptions that are arbitrary, and that is going to continue creating a challenge with funding the government of Uganda as far as the budget is concerned.
All right. A big thank you to our panelists. A big thank you to you all for turning up, and a big thank you to our TV audience for joining us for this discussion. We pretty much want to wrap up for the TV audience, but even as we wrap up, we'll ask Mr. Uchailap to do some final communication and perhaps some housekeeping rules, and we shall be out of here. Thank you.
I think